Hello, this is Caroline Monroe.
And I'm Martine Beswick.
And we're here to tell you about this wonderful and exciting new project that we've both been involved with. It's called Sinbad and the Pirate Princess.
And it's a movie for your ear.
Baghdad. The great city and its citizens are celebrating.
Now, as I am a river to my people.
You must kill her, my handsome and still skeptical Captain Sinbad. The only good pirate is a dead one.
Brace yourself, Captain Bula! The pirates are upon us! Their ship comes alongside us!
I shall not rest until all of Badra's ships are burnt.
You remind me of only one other swordsman with such skill.
Who?
Me!
What is that in that vial?
This? Simply the blood of a siren mixed into a potion that I now drink.
Look! Look! She changes, Captain!
For you and the people of Zelos, I have complete faith in Sinbad. He's the very man you need.
Poe Forevermore Radio Theater, bringing you thrilling tales of mystery and imagination, adaptations and original stories from the works of Poe and from classic and contemporary authors. And now, the producer and star of Poe Forevermore Radio Theater, Mark Redfield.
Our story concerns a building, a modest, tiny little brick house, where one of America's most famous writers once lived for a brief time in his brief life. It concerns itself with ghosts, both the supernatural and the historic kind. What are haunted houses? Are they bad places that draw from the psychic energy of the living and of the dead? Are haunted houses the unlucky places where tormented spirits must wander until some revenge or some restitution is made that will quiet their souls and allow them to finally rest in peace? Oh, the house in our story. The Poe House in Baltimore. A quiet, unassuming building on the west side of the metropolis, built around 1830, where Edgar Allan Poe once lived with his family from about 1833 to 1835. For over 100 years it was a private residence, rented to poor families of every stripe. The house opened to the public by the Poe Society of Baltimore as a museum in 1948, and then, decades later, was operated by the City of Baltimore under the control of the Baltimore City Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation from about 1979, until the City of Baltimore took the funding away and closed it September 28th, 2012. It's now operated again by a private group, and its fate, as always with these things, depends upon raising enough money from the public to keep its doors open. Our story takes place in the year 1938. 1938. The year Superman first appeared in Action Comics. The year Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party took control of Germany. The year Thornton Wilder's play Our Town opened on Broadway. Howard Hughes flew around the world in a record 91 hours. The Yankees won the 35th World Series. In 1938, President Franklin Roosevelt lights the eternal flame at the Gettysburg battlefield. That fall, Orson Welles would scare America with his radio adaptation of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. While in Hollywood, MGM is filming The Wizard of Oz, and Vivien Leigh has been announced to star as Scarlett O'Hara in the film of Margaret Mitchell's popular novel, Gone with the Wind. When you hear my voice again, I'll be playing John Sullivan, an average fellow as far as it comes to Edgar Allan Poe, meaning that he had to read The Raven in high school like the rest of us, and that's about all he knows of the poet and inventor of the detective story. Does John Sullivan believe in ghosts? Well, after you hear him tell you about his experiences, and remember, he's the only witness to the events he'll tell us about, you'll have to make up your own mind and decide for yourself. Baltimore, 1938, an unusually cold October day. Our story begins in the bowels of City Hall. Stella Sullivan and Ralph Henderson, two members of the Poe Society, are hoping to move mountains with little more than faith among members of the Department of Planning and the mayor's office.
Listen, we all have our pet projects, but we're talking about progress here. Much needed progress on the west side of town.
The Department of Planning has made this clear to your group, the Poe Society, is it, that we must proceed with the demolition of the rotten buildings on Amity Street without further delay and on schedule. This public housing project is already
It's a little place, a small building. Surely the city can make an exception and spare it from the wrecking ball. Where's Mr. Plunk from the Department of Planning? I thought he was going to be here.
You must understand, Miss Sullivan, and please relay this to the other members of the Poe Society. We deeply sympathize. And the mayor is actually happens to be an admirer of Edgar Allan Poe. Why, he said to me just this morning that he had to memorize a poem about the talking raven in school as a boy. But we, the mayor, have made commitments, signed contracts, and have spent a great deal of money on this new project, and those buildings on Amity Street must come down.
Come down they must, and they are set for demolition this week.
It's not like we're talking about a great American writer like Mark Twain or...
But all we need is a little more time. I mean, surely a few days to stop the destruction of a house of such historic significance as the house where Edgar Allan Poe once lived. Surely just a few days.
About the dog?
Why didn't you come to us sooner, Miss Sullivan? This public housing project's been in the works for some time now.
We only heard about this from the article in the Sun papers.
We've been trying to get a meeting with the city since then, and everybody's always out or on some vacation. And if it wasn't for Mr. Smith here twisting everybody's arm, we might not have gotten any meeting until the whole block and the Poe house was long torn down. Mr. Smith, you were about to say something a moment ago about Mr. Plunk?
London. Jack London, that's the fella.
Yes, he's away this week. Unfortunately, he's been called...
Well, that's another thing I wanted to understand.
But Poe even an American?
What's that, Mr. Blocker?
I understood that although you've long suspected that Poe lived in that house, I mean the Poe Society, didn't have any proof.
Well, since we read this story in the newspaper last summer, that you were planning on tearing down all the houses in the Poppleton neighborhood, we went to the city archives.
And the Maryland Historical Society.
And the Maryland Historical Society, and we have proof. Your office has had the proof that Poe lived there with his family.
We all have our pet projects, but our hands are tied, Miss Sullivan. The houses, the whole block on Amity Street is set for demolition this week.
Did you say that Mr. Plunk is on vacation, Mr. Smith? How many vacations can a man... Look, can we just meet with the mayor himself?
Well, I appreciate your passion, Miss Sullivan, but as a matter of fact, I'm late now for a meeting with Mayor Jackson. Must skedaddle, but I'll pass along to the mayor that we had a really invigorating meeting. This public housing project has been something of a passion with him, you know. Good day to you, Miss Sullivan. Good day to you, Mr. Anderson.
Stella! Slow down! And calm down. No use letting that Irish temper of yours get the best of you. We'll figure something out.
Those nitwits, I tell you, Ralphie, I could scream and punch their fat faces in.
Calm down. So could I. And I'd hold that idiot down for you, the one that said, was Poe even an American?
I'm sorry, Ralph, but this really gets me going. It makes my blood boil. We are so close. I thought we had it all lined up for the city to spare the demolition of the house, and then give us the time we need to make some kind of deal to care for it. I mean, make it available for people to visit. Make it a museum or something.
Well, we've done everything we can. Everybody. All of us. This galvanized the group.
Sullivan!
I don't know what to say. We were so...
Well, I'm not giving up. I'll think of something.
Hey, isn't that guy Smith from the Department of Planning?
Yeah, what's he want?
Miss Sullivan, I'm glad I caught up with you. Listen, I apologize for not being able to pass this along in there, but there's still some details that need to be worked out. And it's important not to ruffle any feathers at this point, if you understand my meaning.
Sure, Mr. Smith. I mean, what did you want to say?
Well, we have every intention to incorporate the house into the new housing project that you've determined Edgar Allan Poe lived in. In fact, I've seen the new architect's drawings, and he's changed his plans significantly. In fact, the new building that will surround your Poe house, architecturally, it mimics the old house's style. It blends perfectly, I think.
Really? But there's a catch, isn't there?
Yeah, there's always a catch.
No, not really. Just some shenanigans that have to get worked out to keep the mayor's detractors of this whole project happy. Politics as usual, I'm afraid. It seems that some people do not like the idea of subsidizing housing for the poor unless they're white.
But you're saying that the Poe house will be saved from demolition this week.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. In fact, the new complex of houses will be called the Poe Homes. I saw it on the blueprints.
Well, so what's the problem?
I can't get into that right now. I've got to get back inside. But if you want to save the Poe house, do this one thing, and I promise that by Friday, I will have the mayor fully on board with this plan. I promise.
Depends. What do we have to do?
Mr. Smith, I promise, and so does Ralphie. What do we need to do?
Put a member of your group outside of the house all this week while the demolition crew is tearing the block apart. Stand guard, keep watch as it were. Sound crazy, but they can also help stop anybody from vandalizing or trespassing and causing any damage. The point is, although we've got the city to keep the Poe house and not tear it down, they won't put a nickel into it if any more damage that has already occurred. Can you do that?
Not a problem whatsoever, Mr. Smith. We can easily do that. We'll stand guard.
Great. At least until Friday. The deadline and all final approvals get signed this Friday, just 3 days from now. Take care, Miss Sullivan, and I'll be in touch.
Okay, smarty pants. Now, who in the group can spend the week hanging out in a neighborhood that's being torn down and watch a nearly 100-year-old house that for 3 days straight has no electricity and no toilet?
I'll figure it out, Ralph. We haven't come this far to give up now.
My name is John Sullivan. I thought I'd step in about now and set a couple of things straight. This did happen to me, after all, and I wouldn't want you to hear it from anybody else. Especially somebody who wasn't there. Rumors. Everybody likes to yap about crap they don't know anything about. Experts on bullcrap, says I. Somebody who'd make stuff up and exaggerate just for the sake of spinning a yarn. And not that I have any proof of anything that I'm going to tell you about that week and about that awful night in particular during the fall of '38. And you know what? I don't really care if you believe me or not. A lot of years have gone by since that night. A lot of folks are dead now. So maybe I'll change some names around and all that. But even if Poe's house was demolished, blown to smithereens that night, it wouldn't matter in the end. Why? Because it wasn't his work that was ever in danger of disappearing. It was a place he lived, that's all. It's a whole lot more serious when you have to worry about an author's work being lost forever. Nobody reading it. Fascists who don't want you to read something. And yeah, not too long after this, I was in the army and helped kick Hitler's ass, the original book burner, but I'm getting off point. So anyway, I wasn't doing much with my life at the time of this story. I had some, I had some ups and downs and was temporarily out of work. What is it you say nowadays? I was in between. Oh, hell, I had a little trouble with liquor, and I got fired from my job at the Nyborg Printing Company. But anyway, I wasn't doing too much and had some time to kill. I'd been off the booze for a few months. No easy feat, mind you. It took some real willpower, lots of coffee and cigarettes, when I got a call from my sister, Stella, to come downtown and meet her for lunch. Now, my sister Stella, she's a go-getter and a fighting Irish if ever there was one. She was smart as a whip, loved books, was reading all the time. I like to read as much as the next fella, I guess, but I don't make a religion out of it like Sister Stella did. Her little house in Hamilton was like a library, now that I remember it. Books, floor to ceiling. I think she even had some poetry published on and off throughout her life. She was a school teacher over at Glenmount Elementary. Taught the little nose pickers until she retired around 60 or 61 or so. Anyway, she helped me a little during my trouble when I got fired, and here she was, and I owed her a favor. A big favor. Who was I to say no to family? Am I right? You know I'm right. It turned out to be a pretty crackpot, cockeyed idea of a favor, but like I said, I had some time on my hands. So I met her at a little lunch counter over on the west side at Reed's Drugstore on Howard and Lexington.
Stella, have I ever met your brother?
No, you'd remember Johnny if you had.
If you don't mind me asking, how come he's got the time to do this? He independently wealthy, so to speak?
No, far from it. Just the... Oh, Here he comes, better late than never. Hi, Johnny-O.
Hey, sis, what do you say? What do you know?
John Sullivan, meet Ralph Henderson. Ralph, my
Good
brother
to know
John.
you, Ralphie.
Likewise.
Stella got you wrapped up into her little caper, too?
Slow down, Johnny-O.
Well, did you explain everything, John?
Over the phone, but there is something I didn't mention. Are we eating?
Sure, whatever you like.
Really? Let's see. What looks good?
What didn't you mention?
Anything on the menu.
Wait,
Yeah,
what
I
did you
could eat.
forget to tell me?
Waitress.
Johnny?
Hiya, folks. What can I get you?
I don't have a car anymore.
Stella, what do you want?
Nothing for me, suddenly. What do you mean you don't have a car anymore?
I'll have John, you ready?
Hocked it for rent.
Rent?
You got egg salad today?
Sure, rent, and if I'm going to stay out all night, I'll need a car. What about you, Ralphie?
What?
What
Sorry.
can I get you, hon?
Hamburger sandwich and a cup of coffee,
Sure
thanks.
thing. Up in the field.
So, that's settled. I'll use Ralphie's car, and so what's the whole thing
Wait a minute.
about?
I missed something. What about my car? What are you
So,
doing?
baby sister filled me in on the details, and by the time lunch was over, even Ralphie wasn't so worried about his car being in the hands of a complete stranger, but felt he was contributing to the cause. And I had agreed to be security guard for an old dilapidated house that Edgar Allan Poe once lived in. Then the pay was nil, but Stella had promised to feed me dinner every night when I came by to pick up Ralph's car. And remember, I was paying back a great favor she had done for me.
Poe began his writing career in that house. It's true. So you know, Baltimore really is more to Poe than just the place where he died.
I can't thank you enough, Johnny.
Well, I owe you. Don't mention it. Wasn't he born here?
Nah, he was born in Boston. Have you ever read any of his stories?
To tell you the truth, no. I mean, The Raven, sure.
Here.
What's this?
Just a little something to help you pass the next 3
Poe's
nights.
Tales of Mystery and Imagination. Well,
I thought it might be a little more substantial than your usual diet of Shadow and Doc Savage magazines that you read when you do read anything other than the paper.
Oh, I love The Shadow.
Thanks, sis.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
This is perfect for sitting in a dark neighborhood all night, reading some weird horror stuff. That's good thinking, guaranteed to keep me up all night.
Oh, you're a big boy, Johnny-O. You're not afraid of having a little nightmare, are you? Or that the ghosts will get you?
Ghosts. She said it. And I wonder now if she somehow planted the idea in my head that day. Nah. Anyway, I was in. Couldn't refuse such a cockamamie proposal from baby sister and a few free meals, so I arranged to pick up Ralphie's car, and I drove over to Amity Street to look at the house in daylight. Wanted to get the lay of the land, as I had never been in the neighborhood before, and I didn't want to discover everything for the first time in the dead of night. I arrived from the Saratoga Street side, and was immediately directed to detour around the block, as they had an enormous crane and wrecking ball in place, all set to wipe out that first house on the corner of Saratoga and Amity. The house where Edgar Allan Poe once lived was at the other end of the block, so I drove around to get a good look-see. So, that was it. That's the Poe house. It didn't look like much. Not what I expected at all. I got out of the car to get a good look and walk around. It's a 2-story, unassuming brick building. Tiny, really small. Maybe people really were smaller back then. There was a window on the tin roof, a window to an attic or a garret or something. A basement window. Better keep an eye on that and check to see if there were others, because a vagrant could easily enter the building from those. But the window was fastened tight and the glass was intact. In fact, all the windows had glass in them and looked in pretty good shape. Small front door, offset to the left with a window, and 2 more windows on the second floor. As I stood there looking at the building, I then realized that it had a twin. It was a duplex, really. And although there was some work and obvious additions were done, the house on the left was identical to Poe's house and attached to it. I guess they were going to have to save them both from the wrecking ball, but I wasn't sure. From Poe's house and its twin, stretching the whole block to the left toward Saratoga Street, were a series of houses, each different and built somewhere over the last 100 years or so. It was obvious that Poe's house, the one my sister and her group so desperately wanted to save, was the oldest on the entire street. Across the street was the same mishmash of brick houses, 3-story buildings, squat little monstrosities, all piled up on one another, all boarded up and set for either demolition or fixing up. I didn't know which at the time. My attention was on number 3 Amity Street, Poe's house. I walked toward the right side where a large wooden fence was and pushed a couple of boards out of the way to see what I could see. The entire side of the house looked secure, as there wasn't a single opening anywhere, not a window or a door. Round back, piled with trash in the small yard, I could see the back door of the house and a small window that looked into a kind of alcove. But with all the lumber and rubble and trash, I couldn't really tell if there was a window to worry about. The leaves were still pretty much on the trees, though a lot of the red and gold ones had fallen on the ground already.
Hey, can I help you, buddy?
Oh, hey, you the top man around here?
I'm trespassing, you know.
Well, I just wanted to see this old place before you boys tear it down.
What's special about it?
Oh, friends tell me it's where Edgar Allan Poe lived almost 100 years ago.
That opium addict, huh?
Well, my friends might argue with you about that.
Only a crazy man could write them kind of stories. Don't do for that sort of thing myself. Say, you ain't got a cigarette, do you?
Well, yeah, sure do, friend. Here. So, when do you think they'll tear it down?
Thanks. Bill Upton is the name.
John Sullivan. So I see they started knocking the buildings down at the end of the block. Think they'll get to this one by Friday?
That's what's on the schedule.
Huh.
You're not the owner, are you?
Oh, no. I just promised these friends of mine I'd keep an eye on it. Make sure no tramps or bums burn it down. Seems like the whole block is abandoned.
It is now. Last family moved out 2 days ago.
Just 2 days ago?
Sure. Your friends want to keep this house because Poe lived here?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Well, good luck to him. Hey, what'd you say your name is?
John Sullivan.
Well, Mr. Sullivan, I wouldn't recommend spending the night here in any of these buildings on account of the rats.
Oh?
But if you sleep in your car and stay on the street, park it more on the corner. Just be sure to get off the street before 7 a.m. and when the crew gets here, the dump trucks full of rubble will head out in that direction.
Good advice. Thanks, Mr. Upton. Otherwise, you don't think anybody's going to mind me on the street overnight, do you?
Who's going to know? Nobody living on this block anymore. And by Wednesday, when we've knocked enough of these houses down, the rats aren't even going to stay around. Well, hey, thanks for the cigarette, pal.
Well, the first night started off rather uneventful. I sat in the car, parked on the corner of Amity and Lexington, and had the book of Poe with me that Stella gave me. It was raining, and that made it colder than I expected. I made a mental note to bring a little something to keep me warm, a thermos of coffee, or maybe something a little stronger. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I knew what time it was because not only did I borrow Ralphie's car for this mission, I borrowed a watch too. I didn't own one. Hocked it some time ago. Anyway, it was about 4 in the morning. The rain, it was steady, and I was wide awake and had read a clutch of Poe short stories. That gruesome hop frog who burned all those fat people to death in his King. That guy who stabbed out the cat's eye and hung the poor thing. There was a parade of gruesome horrors that night, worse than a spook house show or a waxworks display, and yet I couldn't stop reading. As much as I wanted a cup of coffee or a pull of whiskey to warm me up, and I knew whiskey was out of the question. I'd been dry for a little while, and I was damn proud of that. But as much as I was shivering from the cold night, I was kind of liking the shivers from Poe's page-turning nightmares. I was in the middle of reading The Telltale Heart. If you still think me mad, you will think me no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. Yeah, this guy was set for the booby hatch. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. Ha ha! When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. And as the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking. At first I wasn't sure if I had heard it. Maybe it was a cat or some piece of metal from one of the demolished houses just down the block. I got out of the car and listened hard. It sort of started to gnaw at me. Then a really bad thought crossed my mind while I stood there out in the rain on Amity Street, standing in front of the house of the man whose stories that I was just reading that were just making my skin crawl. But now this new unimaginable thought was making my skin crawl. A goosebump and made it worse. What if it was somebody, a tramp or a bum, trapped under the rubble? And that's whose scream I heard. You know, some poor son of a... No, that was a woman. And that came from the Poe house. I took the flashlight from the car. I walked across the street to the house. I wasn't sure what to do. I'm pretty sure, I'm certain it was a scream. And I'm pretty sure it came from the house. I went to the house, climbed the 3 wooden steps, and I don't have a key. Should I break the door down? Is anybody there? Is anybody hurt? Hey! Is anybody here? I heard you. Are you okay? It's pitch black and the flashlight is pretty dim. I used up the batteries reading all night in the car. Damn it. Cold as hell in here. This isn't good.
John.
You've been listening to The Haunting of the Poe House Part 2, written by Hawkins Weber for Poe Forevermore Radio Theater. Our play stars Mark Redfield as John, Marianne Perry as Stella, and is supported by Mike Moran, B. Thomas Rinaldi, and Johanna Weber. Original music and orchestrations are by Jennifer Rouse. Our sound effects designer is Max Baring. Our audio engineer is Bill Dixon. For Poe Forevermore Radio Theater, this is your announcer, Greg Carpenter.
You have been listening to The Haunting of the Poe House, a production of Poe Forevermore Radio Theater.